Fragments of silicon are not to be used for cutting open envelopes this week.
Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon, the Daylight Interviews. Joining us this week is one Christian M., better known as Waterflame.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Thank you for being here. Right, so let's see. How we like to get started is we like to get to know the people behind games, the studios, and all that business. And we do that by asking this particular question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
I mean, on a personal level, that was as early as 6 years old. My first console, Sega Mega Drive, or, well, Genesis. Yeah, I mean, ever since I got that, I was just, I was instantly hooked, you know. Just everything about all the mediums combined. Yeah, I knew what I wanted to do already then. So, but on the professional level, it was, yeah, I mean, it naturally followed, right? Like, gaming was a hobby when I was a kid. So I was like, oh, it would be amazing to work with gaming, right? Get to do what you want to do all day. So, yeah, I guess it started there.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon refrain we've had.
I bet, yeah.
You know, it's like, because, yeah, they got in, you know, they played the games as kids, and, you know, game developers of various sorts eventually wanted to make the games. Now, admittedly, you know, and I know you have since gotten into other aspects of game development. You are primarily known as a video game music composer.
That's right, yeah.
So, I suppose an additional track here is, when did you start making music, and when did that transpose into, you know, making music for video games?
Right. So I started making. I started like dabbling with music as soon as I could touch like shareware programs on Mac or something like that when I was like 7, 8, you know, but just no more than any other kid. But when it really started was actually pretty closely linked to gaming from the start, because I got my hands on a game called Music 2000, or MTV Music Generator, I think it's called in the US. And It's actually like a fully fledged DAW for the PlayStation 1, just kind of hidden behind this music editor or video editor. And once I realized that I could like make my own music on the PlayStation, there was like no going back for me, really. I started doing nothing else, basically. So that's where it started for me. It was, yeah, like I've always wanted to make my own video game music since I heard the Sega games when I was a kid. But yeah, that was like when I started. I think I was like 12, 13, like the first time I really started composing anything.
Okay. And
yeah, was there a second question?
Well, it's like, I'm wondering how robust of a music creator was this MTV Music game?
That's the thing. It was like, I'd say fully fledged. So it had like all the staple things that you need to make electronic music. Today, that is like the industry standard, where you have like a beat sequencer, you have something you could load samples into, you have a playlist so you can arrange the track, and you have effect mixer tracks so you can like put delay and things on things. You could even chop notes and import your own samples from CDs. Like you could take the PlayStation disc out and import a sample. That would be huge though, so they would take like half a memory card just to like get one sample, but it was possible. So I'd say like you could you could probably like make a whole album on that thing to this day. I think it's available for PC as well. So
Like, gotta admit, I was not expecting that kind of product to ever exist for, like the PlayStation 1, especially.
me too. I was like flabbergasted when I found it. It was like a dream come true. So yeah, I've always been a fan of that program. I've actually been thinking about like going back to it now that I'm actually like a composer professionally, to see like what I can do with it today.
Be an interesting experiment, if nothing else. But anyway, I suppose the next question there is, when did you transition to, I won't say like more professional tools, but more PC based programs, or Mac, or
Right.
more, it's like that would enable you to post music online, because I do know that you first gained notoriety in the Newground scene.
That's right. Yeah.
So when did all that occur?
Yeah. So I mean, I had a PC from I think when I was around 14 or something, but we didn't exactly like have a very good internet connection. So, or internet connection at all, really, because it was hooked to the landline and everything. I wasn't allowed to use it. So, but I started making music on FL Studio or Fruity Loops, like a really early version back when it was more rudimentary. Like a friend came over with it because he had gotten it from like an uncle or something that had like a license and several spots on the license. So yeah, I just came over with it one summer, and yeah, it felt like the upgrade to the PlayStation game. Basically, it was just like everything I wanted on a PC. So yeah, after I discovered FL, that was immediately like a swap. I started using that instead. But I actually I didn't upload from my own like computer back then. I had to like burn it on a CD and go to a friend's house and upload it to Newgrounds. That was like how I got my first music out there. That was like in 2004 or something like that. I hope I'm not misquoting myself, but yeah.
It sounds like the kind of thing you would have to do in 2004.
Right.
Because 2004, we're still a year out from the first version of YouTube, even.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people lament the loss of the decentralized web, but it had its drawbacks.
Yeah, that's that's true, definitely true. Like it would be considered very inconvenient these days. A lot of those things you had to deal with. Yeah, like I remember even just like patching an online game, you could be like the death of you playing that game because like you couldn't afford patching it because of the landline.
And I'm assuming that your music was received fairly warmly by the Newgrounds community.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was just like any other like person there. Really, I was. I actually like. I remember looking up to that guy Paragon X9. That's kind of like a legend on Newgrounds. Like I really wanted to get to his level, and I was listening to his music. But otherwise, I was just like, yeah, I was just learning and posting there like everyone else. So I wasn't like, um, it wasn't like an instant discovery kind of thing. It was more like I grew with the community over time, and then some of my tracks here and there started like getting more attention than others because they were catchy, and yeah, I started to like learn, get better. So it was definitely like a gradual process, but yeah, then the like first, I guess, big sort of hit, I guess that made people notice me was a Glorious Morning, because it was used in Age of War, which has become like a flash game classic.
Right.
And yeah, which funnily enough, since yeah, here we are talking about or probably segueing into Castle Crashers, Glorious Morning was actually made for a Castle Crashers competition on Newgrounds, where you could like enter to get or you would try to make the main theme, right? And I didn't place top 3; I placed 4th or something. But yeah, I finished it anyway, so it's like an interesting trivia, I guess.
I mean, was that where you established a connection to the behemoth?
Yeah, I mean that's where that started. So I mean, this was years and years later after joining Newgrounds. Like I had been there for a long time by then, and that wasn't actually my first video game music job either. The first game I made music for was like a Mexican speak and spell game called I am probably butchering how you pronounce it, but Mecha Pumble. Which was like it was actually like a box release that was sold in supermarkets and stuff, but obviously that never went anywhere far. But yeah, I was like 17 when I composed the soundtrack for that. But then Castle Crashers was like the second thing that wasn't just like a flash game that someone made in their off time, but like an actual like sold product.
Right. I mean, though the spirit was certainly there with Castle Crashers.
The what? Sorry,
the
I
spirit
didn't.
was certainly there because like the behemoth very famously came out of the Newgrounds scene, and this wasn't even their first game.
Yeah, it was
Alien Hominid.
Yep. Which I remember buying and then realizing I bought the wrong region, so I could never play it, because I had a PAL PlayStation. Oops, yeah.
I mean, granted, there were re-releases. Like, I know it hit the 360 as Alien Hominid HD.
Oh, yeah, I played it later. But, back then it was, was harder to, or you would you had to invest in the game, right? They weren't as readily available.
Anyway, getting directly into it with Castle Crashers, how many tracks did you end up producing for the game?
Totally not counting in my head right now. Right, so there's well, the question is kind of there's like 7 tracks I think in the game that I made, but not all of them were produced for the game. And that comes so there's only 2 of the tracks that are specifically made for Castle Crashers, and the rest of it was either stuff that I had put out on Newgrounds that wasn't related to it, but they wanted to use, or stuff that I had that was almost finished that could be used for that.
Now, when it comes to the pre-release stuff, did you have to adjust it in any way to make sure it fit the motif for the soundscape or something of that nature of the game?
When it came to Castle Crashers, not really, to be honest, because they since the game is made by Tom Fulpen and the guys, Dan Paladin, and they basically live on Newgrounds, so they had the luxury to go through the audio portal and pick out what they wanted. So that sort of worked the opposite way, where they already knew what they wanted for the level, and they just asked the creator on the site. So I didn't really have to do much of anything of editing for this game, but there has been some small things. For instance, the game got a re-release later with the backup barbarian mode, or what was that correct? The extra multiplayer mode that they added. Then they added one of my songs as well that I made a slightly different version of. But other than that, not really. There was one track, the swamp level track, that was specifically made for the game. So in that instance, I thought about the atmosphere, obviously, because I was actually composing for the game. But other than that, it was determined by them, not me, basically.
Okay. And in terms of the music that was written specifically for Castle Crashers, was it challenging? Was it an additional challenge to make a music track or music tracks for a game on a more substantive level than anything you had done before?
There was definitely like higher pressure, but also I didn't really have much time to think about it. To be honest, like I didn't really feel any of that like industry pressure with this job. A job that would come a lot later, but because with this job it was more like Tom Fulp just sort of asked me in the DMs. Basically, it was all kind of like casual, but I also realized that this was my window to get my music in there, because there was like a time crunch, and they had asked if I had some like extra music for this and this type of level, for instance the swamp level. So I just like hurried up and finished this like concept I had lying around. Like I think I stayed up for like 2 nights or something to finish that. So yeah, there was like an urgency there, but I didn't have really any time to think about any pressure. It was like a few days later I delivered, and that was basically it.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it was a outside of the time crunch you mentioned, a relatively smooth transition. I guess it does help that you're all from the same community.
For sure, yeah. Like that. That's what made this. Yeah. So like kind of was a rarity there, because they already were sitting on so many resources, basically.
Mm-hmm. So, what did you work on after Castle Crashers?
So I mean a variety of things. There was always little like flash games and mobile games that I've worked on like basically throughout my career, but these are things that often don't go anywhere. And to be honest, also when I took the jobs, I kind of knew that. I knew they were low paid, and it was more like something just to get by. So it's a lot of those that kind of like I guess one of the I made a music for Kawaii Run 1 and 2. That was like a flash game that took off a little bit more on, because he also made a phone version and like a PC version. So and then there's all these like flash games that has like become popular slash mobile versions later, because everyone like apparently played them back then and are very nostalgic for them. But that wasn't something I really noticed much of at the time. But it was stuff like Raze, Strike Force Heroes, those game series. But like the next big title after that, I guess was in 2011. I made music for Castle Storm for Zen Studios.
Right.
Yeah. Which I've sent you the links for.
Yeah.
Which is it was kind of like sort of like a castle builder meets Angry Birds sort of thing, with a little bit of they had like a bunch of different elements, but that was like a fully fledged game that came out on Xbox 360 and PS3 at the time.
I believe Castle Storm was actually the first game I identified with your music. So to speak.
Cool.
Yeah. I know most people would probably be Castle Crashers. I don't think I had Castle Crashers in 2011 or 2000, whenever. Like, I definitely remember playing Castle Storm first.
Okay, yeah, so it was the reverse for you.
Yeah. And Yeah, Castle Storm is a weird one, not just in terms of like what it actually is, because it's a like I'm trying to remember. I want to say it's a tower defense game, but with a twist.
Kind of, yeah. But it also has that element where you can like take temporarily control over a hero.
Yeah.
So, and you also use abilities and stuff. So yeah, it's like hard to identify. It's like a mishmash of all sorts of like a little bit of Angry Birds, a little bit of tower defense, a little bit of base building.
Yeah, it's unique, I suppose, outside of its own sequel, but
yeah,
it's it is definitely a game I can't think of like another game like it, and it's also I remember the music being really different from what you usually compose, as like you're pretty renowned for EDM of various sorts.
Yeah.
And Castle Storm is much more, I hesitate to use the word traditional, but it's more, let's say medieval.
Yeah, or orchestral, I guess you could say.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
And my question in relation to that is, did you find it a difficult prospect adapting to such a radically different sound space?
Actually, not at all, because that's sort of why, or part of the reason why I became, popular on Newgrounds to begin with, was because I always liked exploring music and messing around with genres. So it felt honestly very natural to me to sort of combine those elements, because the soundtrack is it's orchestral, but it has that like ground bass of electronic. Like a lot of the tracks still has an electronic bass or like a synthetic drum kit. But yeah, no, I just found that incredibly fun, honestly, to mix those genres, because that's kind of what I was doing anyway. Yeah. But in that job, though, the only like sort of, I guess, the difficulty I had was that I was on a big time crunch. The entire album got finished in a couple of months, so I basically worked on that day and night. I remember finishing it 2 hours before we set the deadline. Like, it wasn't that super strict. Like, I could have probably gotten a day extension, but at least I was proud of myself for getting it there on time,
I suppose a question jumping off of that is, are your projects these days still subject to those kind of time crunches?
Yeah, sometimes.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the project, but there's usually like some sort of deadline involved, and unfortunately, I mean, right now I'm kind of fortunate there, because I don't take as many commissions from other companies. It's more like things I work on now is actually in conjunction with companies I actually have like ownership in, and it's more like me making the things. But yeah, when I do take a commission, there's usually like a deadline, and they're usually stricter than what you'd think. I don't know why, but it seems to be like a habit in the game industry of contacting the musician a little bit too late,
I mean, given the game developer interviews we've done over the years, music definitely seems to come in at the later stages of development most of the time. Not all the time, but music is definitely one of those, I won't say afterthoughts, but it's definitely not on the front of the mind either, in terms of like if somebody's a programmer or a writer, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's kind of like like definitely with or without music in a game is like worlds different. But at the end of the day, it doesn't like while producing the game, they're only looking for like what breaks the game, and music is one of those things that, you know, if it's there or not, like the game still works. So I get why it comes late, but at the same time, it's yeah. I mean, it totally depends on the game. Some games have very dynamic soundtracks where they have the music integrated with a lot of coding. So, you know, in those instances, they contact you a lot earlier.
Yeah. Well, I think we have seen. I won't say the entire gamut, but the range there up to like the occasional developer who actually does the music themselves. Either they have the training or the programming skills, or
Yeah.
you know, even those who will like use royalty-free music for one reason or another. So, now getting back to Castle Storm specifically, yeah, this was produced from Zen Studios out in, what was it? I'm trying to like Romania or
Wow, I forget myself.
yeah. I know they're in Eastern Europe, but I'm trying to remember if like Hungary.
Hungary, that's it. Yeah, Hungary.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we've spoken to them a few times over the years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I think if we talk, I do think we did talk about Castle Storm 1 back in the day. Like, but anyway, what was it like working with, you know, a foreign studio that may not necessarily communicate in your own language, especially versus, you know, Castle Crashers, which is like your own running buddies.
Right. I actually had a great experience there. Like, I don't think I've ever had many bad experiences in the industry in general. Like, I'm very on that asking questions if there's something I don't understand, right? So since I did like ask a lot and send a lot of references and things, and like had an open dialogue the whole time. So yeah, I didn't find any problems with that at all. I mean, they knew English well, and so did I. So yeah, there was no problems there really. Of course, a lot of it was new to me. It was like at that point my weak side was like definitely mastering, and it's, you know, I'd still say I have things to learn there. So you know, it was sometimes a little bit of back and forth of like me trying to, you know, get things right, but there was never any like communication issues. We had a really good tone.
Okay. And did you end up working on Castle Storm 2?
Yes. So that one's I mean, I can't really tell you for sure why the soundtrack isn't out yet because yeah, wait, I mean, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here, but you know, COVID hit, and then, you know, we were discussing it, and then it sort of phased out. So I have yet to, you know, see that happens. But yes, I did also make the soundtrack for that game. So yeah, which was actually like bigger, and I'd say like a lot more of an undertaking than the first one. And I also know that Castle Storm 2 also uses some of the music from the first one, because it also includes the old levels in some instances. So they have that in the soundtrack as well.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds like it's your standard sequel escalation. Did you have to learn any new instruments or do any new tricks for Castle Storm 2? Or was it just, you know, like a bigger version of Castle Storm's soundtrack?
At that point, I had already done another game soundtrack for them in between Castle Storm.
Mm-hmm.
I made a soundtrack for Infinite Minigolf, which also had like an orchestral sound, but a more mellow one, but still sort of like had those like video game roots, I guess. So I feel like that the soundtrack for Castle Storm 2 was kind of like a fusion between that a little bit. Like it was a lot of the same sort of instrumentation use that I learned from that job, but on a much like grander scale, I guess. So yeah, personally, I really like the tracks for the second game. I just yeah, I mean, I can't send anyone to listen to them anywhere else in the game, but you know.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that the soundtrack seems to be, well, for lack of a better term, buried within the game. And also unfortunate that the PC version is stuck on the Epic Game Store. Because,
Yeah.
you know, not to disparage the Epic Game Store too much, but, you know,
a little bit is fine.
To get to the point, Steam has soundtracks available for purchase.
Yeah.
Readily available. Whereas I don't know if they've added that functionality to the Epic Game Store yet, but
I don't actually know either.
You know, it's just I know if there was a Steam version of this, it probably would be having the soundtrack there, or at least the option would be there versus the Epic Game Store where since it's a newer store and it's still getting features, it's especially when it got released, a bit behind the time.
Yeah. So we'll see about that. Like we basically just haven't communicated properly about it, but yeah, maybe it's something that can be bundled with when it gets released from the Epic Game Store prison.
I'm not sure if that'll happen because
if it happens, yeah, I'm not okay. So yeah, I'm for the record, I don't speak for Zen Studios at all. No. This is just speculation.
No, I get you, but I'm doubtful because it's been over a year since that game got released, and it's been a significant amount of time. And usually, if a game doesn't make the jump, that means it's Epic Game Store exclusive permanently, more times than not.
Yeah.
And so, I guess we'll see what happens there, but that's my assessment of that particular situation. Anyway,
it is available on consoles too, though.
True. I'm just saying in terms of the soundtrack in and of itself.
Yeah, that's kind of like for now. That's gotta go play the game to listen to that one. Yep.
Right, and and consoles do not have a separate soundtrack option.
No, they don't.
At least nobody has done that yet. I guess I cannot preclude the idea that such an option might eventually get added to the Xbox ecosystem, but until then, it's just not there. Anyway, so moving, maybe not necessarily forward, but a game I do want to talk about here because I actually picked this up not too long ago, Geometry Dash.
Yes.
Which is. I haven't actually had the chance to play it because, well, I have a lot of games to deal with at any one time. But it's kind of like what it says on the tin, if I'm being honest.
So it's a colorful rhythm game, and I definitely also owe a lot of my continued success to that game because it's still being so widely played to this day, and. Yeah, and also its integration with Newgrounds, because you said you haven't played it, so you might not know, but to actually like you can use the editor to make really complicated user created content, but the tracks that you use for the game needs to have like an ID code from Newgrounds, and it needs to be uploaded to Newgrounds. So the system is directly linked to the site, basically. Which is kind of become like an ecosystem, right? Because it's good for the musicians to get some sort of exposure, outside the platform, and it's good for the creators because they get free music. So
like give a community a tool set and they'll do some wacky stuff.
yeah, for sure.
And yes, it is known the TTC also exists. Like, I will mention that here because if someone wants to comment, yes, that is totally a thing. But anyway, is that connection just to the PC version, or can you find that in the mobile version as well?
The editing?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's also in the mobile version. So it's all like interconnected, basically. But yeah, which is cool. But I honestly I can't speak like that much on Geometry Dash because like after my involvement, which is now several years ago, I haven't really like played it. So yeah, because like you said, so many games, and I have so much other like so many other things to do. But I did have direct involvement with that game. So there's 2 tracks for the game that is specifically made for the game, which is unique to those tracks. Like everything else in the game is kind of like licensed, but those are specifically made for the game. But other than that, my involvement with the game continues because a lot of people use my music for these custom levels to this day. So yeah, I don't actually make new music for the game anymore. I just, people make levels.
Yeah. Now, was it just writing music tracks for Geometry Dash, or was it like giving sound effects and such things as well?
No, in that case, it was just music tracks, and I had like pretty free reins on that as well, because I basically, I'd say sort of like my comfort zone is that sort of upbeat electronic music. So
yeah,
I could just like make one of my tracks and go ham, and that would be it. So
yeah, and as interesting as it would be to focus on like each individual game here on your discography, we do have a limited amount of time, and I think we do want to move to more modern projects.
of course,
like specifically to that you've linked in our Discord right now, Hotshot Racing, which is, for those who might not know what this game is, it's basically Curve Digital's and Sumo Digital's love letter to early 90s arcade racers, like specifically Sega arcade racers.
yeah. Or I'd say, just to correct you there, Lucky Mountain Games is the ones who made it. Yeah. But yeah, so Curve published it and everything. But absolutely, it's like it's like a love letter, like you said.
Yeah. Like its graphical style is like kind of a mash of Daytona, and it's got the polygonal structure of Virtua Racing, like and the gameplay of, say, Outrun.
Yeah.
Once again, it's something I have picked up but haven't gotten around to playing yet. Like, but it's looked nifty, and I suppose my question in terms of the music here is: did you go for a electronic soundscape here, or was it something more in keeping with what Sega racers had in the 90s.
Definitely more in keeping with Sega. Like I've always been a huge fan of like arcade racers, so
Right.
that was kind of like a dream come true for me making music for this game. But the thing is, I actually got the job a long time ago because the game started out as well, it was called Racing Apex at first, and all the cars had guns, and it was like a lot more chunky and visceral. It was a completely different game, basically. And that's when they hired me to do the music initially. So I made the tracks sort of like inspired by, like Sega, sort of classic, arcade machine games, and things like Outrun, Ridge Racer. So that's where I drew the inspiration from. But then a couple of years later, they basically came back and said like, look, hey, we've partnered up with Curve, and we're basically like rebooting the whole thing. It's getting a new name, and also we want to make the soundtrack dynamic. So I basically went back to my old soundtrack and dissected the whole thing and remade it. And during that process, I leaned a little bit more into the Sega funk, I guess you could say. So it was definitely inspired by the games of that era.
Right. And what was the reception like there? Because I know, how do I put this? That arcade racing music has its charm, but it's also an acquired taste. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
oh yeah, like if you love it, you really love it, or you might think it's annoying.
The Daytona USA music is very, very cheesy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very enjoyable, but I've definitely seen it turn off more than a few people.
Yeah. So I guess in that soundtrack, I'm more inspired by Rage and Ridge Racer, which is more like a sort of like that frantic sort of club sample sound. It's like very 90s techno, basically, and so that's sort of like the sound I went for, Tim, the other composer, because there's two composers on the soundtrack. He also like leaned heavily into that. So like you said, definitely an acquired taste, but that's sort of like what we try to emulate, those like nostalgic feelings from that sort of soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. Right, and since we are starting to run low on time here, I do want to move to what I believe is your current project, and that is, well, it's just titled here VR Jetpack Game.
So I mean that. Okay, I'll be quick because it's kind of complicated. But so I've helped with that game. It isn't my game, but it's from Autodidactic Studios, which I'm like a part owner of. But yeah, I've been helping out with that game. It's basically concluded now. We're just we're editing like little things, but it's a VR jetpack game, and it's fully operational in multiplayer. It's online, and it's fully physics based. It even has like an arena with MMR that's tracked online and everything, and the game is free on Steam. So that has been like kind of our first game project, I guess, as a studio. But more what I am working on personally, because I'm also going into games as a sole proprietor, and what I'm working on is called Welkin. You can find it on my website, but it's a roguelike with like pixel graphics. I'm also making most of the art myself, and it's going to have like sort of multiplayer PvP components. So that's something I'm gonna transition more into this year and the coming years, where I've sort of that's why I've closed for commissions, so I don't do music work that much really this year or the coming years, because 50% of my time is going to go to creating this game instead, and I'm in the process of hiring extra talent and things to get things going. So yeah, like the coming years, I might also be a game producer, basically.
Okay. And so the obvious question there is, what made you want to move on to, well, full bore game development?
Well, I've always like loved everything creative, so I guess my rationale is that games is sort of like the ultimate art form, because you combine everything there. It's music, it's visuals, it's storytelling, it's coding. So the sort of final bastion for me is to be able to make a video game myself, where I've like made everything, you know. But you know, my aspirations got a little bit too big, and this game world I've been creating has started to grow because it ties in heavily with my music as well. So it's basically become a project that's too big for one person to handle. So that's why I'm gonna, you know, outsource other talent. But I guess the short answer is that I've always wanted to make a video game just as much as I enjoy making music, and I feel like now I'm at the point where my career is stable with music, and I'm at the point where I can actually like take the time and invest in doing that and see where it goes. You never know, it might flop, but hey, at least I tried, right?
Like, it's certainly an attitude we've encountered before on the program. Like,
Yep.
and just focusing in a bit, what made you want to make this game, this roguelike thing?
Right. It's basically like my love letter to everything I love about gaming. It's the game where I get to put everything that I think would be an awesome game into the pot and just like make my favorite theoretical game, right? And I think that honestly, I think that should be the basis of any game developers like thought process, right? Like make the coolest game you can imagine. So I'm not really like making it for anyone. It's more like my dream game coming to life. And I mean, I've been playing games since I was 6, and I'm pretty critical of them. So I'd like to think that if I love the games, others will too. So
Okay. Once again, that is something we've encountered quite a bit on the program. You know, especially on the indie devs circuit. You know, we've featured a lot of small teams, let's say, where their rationale for making a game is because they want to make a game, specifically that game. And
yeah,
sounds along those lines.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
how much of the game has actually been developed up to this point?
I'd say like 1%. I mean, I'm starting kind of backwards, whereas I already have a lot of concept, like sort of I'm doing the world building in pixel art and with music. So there's already a lot of like music and art assets being created sort of around the game, but the main production hasn't really fully started yet. But it's going to be segmented, so I'm not jumping out and making a full game right away. There's going to be sort of like a contained, smaller version of the game first, because the sort of the twist with the game is that it's going to also have this online PvP component. And with that in mind, I have to build a game thinking about netcode and PvP balancing issues. That has to be like in the ground structure of the game, or else, like if you make a single player game first and tack on the multiplayer later, you're gonna have problems. So yeah, it's basically what I'm doing first of all is making a contained sort of roguelike fighting game that's going to be the sort of the skeleton of the main game.
Yeah, and I've heard from various people that that kind of thing can be its own special nightmare.
Definitely. That's why I was kind of lucky there to work on this VR jetpack game first, because those servers are online at all times, and it has full netcode. There's no lag. There's full physics. There's VR, and there's like the ladder and everything. So, me and like the guys on my team has already sort of been through all of those problems with netcode and multiplayer. So I feel like for this project we know what to avoid and how to structure things. So it'll be solid from day one.
Okay. And are you making this game in Unity?
Actually, it was looking like Godot for a while, but then we ultimately decided on Unreal Engine because of its multiplayer components, and also I'm using a lot of like paper 2D, like that aspect of Unreal Engine. So it's going to be like 3D with not 2D with 3D elements and dynamic lighting, things like that.
Vicious.
So yeah.
How many people are you looking to get to work on this game?
So since we already have some people in-house, like a programmer, I think I'm going to like realistically need 4 more people for this project. Like I said, I'm doing it in stages, but I think like the main bulk of it is going to be animation and animation coding, because it's going to be a dynamic system since it's a roguelike, and items are also going to change appearance of the characters. So there needs to be like coding in place to actually change colors and stuff of pixels, so that you don't have to do like several 100,000 animations with different boots on, so there's a lot of things like that goes into it. So I probably need an animator, programmer, and extra like artist, basically.
Okay. And well, does the game have a name yet?
Yeah, so it's work in progress title, but Welkin is what it goes under. So on my website there is some like very early tech demo stuff. You can check out. It was originally called Skyworld, so it's Welkin / Skyworld. But the thing is that that title can become problematic when officially licensed, because there's already way too many things called Skyworld. So that's why Welkin came about instead. Which, yeah, I mean, that word translates to the sky above or heaven, so it's kind of the same thing.
Leave luck to heaven.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's about it for my line of questions. I'll see if my colleagues here have anything additional to ask you.
Yeah, go for it.
I think I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you answered everything that I was thinking of.
All right, great.
Yeah. All right, Christian, it was good having you on the program, and talking about your musical career. And I suppose when your Welcome In game is much further along in development, let's say, we could have you on the show again to talk about that in more detail. As obviously, all we got here is just the very basic contours of the idea of what this is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be cool. Sure.
But until then, Waterflame's music is available on YouTube. I know I listened to a bunch of it like just a few hours ago.
Nice. Yeah, YouTube, Spotify, Bandcamp, Newgrounds, everywhere.
Yeah. So if you want to check out his work, it is readily available on your streaming or video platform of choice in the case of
Indeed.
YouTube. So, and yeah, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. If you enjoyed this interview, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and do all the things that you need to do to keep abreast of when we go live next. And speaking of such things, we will be returning on Sunday for our typical review session. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.
All right. Thanks for having me.